Blog Talk Radio.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to IHWE Radio. Once again, I am your host, Michael McCurdy, the creator and author of Encyclopedia WCCW. And as always, I am joined by my co-host, who we shall add another title to his list of credits. He is the director of this radio show. He is the founder, owner, and promoter of IHWE and the Texas Wrestling Hall of Fame, and first-time author, David Fuller. How you doing tonight, David?
I'm doing well. Thank you for that astounding announcement, and thank you for adding author to it. I am looking very much forward to my future project, which we'll get into later on in the show and in upcoming weeks.
I'm looking forward to hearing more about it. Now, you got to slow down with the titles, man, or else your intro is going to be about 5 minutes long. We're going to start cutting into our guests, so...
All right, we'll work on maybe just getting a one-word intro and putting everything in together. You know, like Mary Poppins had a long word, supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. I don't even remember it. My wife is telling me it. So what are those words? We put it all together. So there we go. Hashtag it. Get it trending. Here we go. All right.
There we go. Hashtag one big long word. I'll work on it. We'll have it up next week.
Damn right. Okay.
Anyways, man, we got some big news going on this week. Obviously, last Sunday we had the WWE Royal Rumble. Unfortunately, I did predict the winner. I did not predict what was going to happen after the show, nor did any of us see what was coming up. We have a little issue right now with CM Punk. Word is that Monday night he may have quit the WWE.
There's a lot of rumors floating around about Punk. And the thing is we really don't know. It's a lot of speculation. None of us really know except The Office and Phil Brooks, CM Punk. I just read Dave Meltzer's newsletter. Dave is a trusted journalist, and for people who don't know, Dave's been in the wrestling business for 3 decades. I trust him. He's been very cordial to me, and we're actually working on getting him to be a guest on the show. Without going too much into it, it just seems like there's a lot of things involved, burnout. People don't get how torrential the WWE schedule is. Those guys, and CM Punk isn't a part-timer. He's a guy who runs the house show circuit. He's not young. He's not a spring chicken. He's 35 years old, and he killed himself for years before he ever went to WWE. So here's a guy who, he's a wrestler. He's not a sports entertainer. So CM Punk is a guy who for years is used to work in the same circuit I am, the independent circuit, where you pretty much answered either one guy or two guys. You work your matchup with your opponent, and you go out there and do your thing. You don't really have all these rules. WWE, you have to answer to 100 different people, and things change at the cusp of a second. So, which is why I never wanted to work for WWE because I don't think I could stand it. On the flip side, you make money there, you become a larger-than-life superstar, and you become an icon in pop culture. I think there's a lot of underlying issues with Punk. I know he's banged up. He said it on many different occasions. He had an interview with Ariel Arani of the MMA Hour last week that I watched. He was at Wizard World in Portland. He answered a few questions. I don't think it's Batista winning the Royal Rumble. I don't think it's boo. He's going to WrestleMania and I'm not. The thing that people don't understand, and Michael, we'll get your opinion on this, but the thing that people don't understand is all this backlash, and I'll go into this again once we talk about the Royal Rumble. Let me take a little segue here and talk about Batista. Yes, Batista winning the Royal Rumble may not have made a lot of people happy. WWE is a multi-billion-dollar organization that has plans, and they're not going to change those plans just to appease, They look at things on a grander scale. They see Batista has this draw because he's been gone for so long, and usually that is the way things go. The longer you're gone, the more the heart misses you. That is not what happened Sunday night. The fans wanted Daniel Bryan, which we'll get into here in a second. But I want to make this point very clear. People talk about Batista being in the main event of WrestleMania. Unless Batista is wrestling John Cena, or unless Batista is wrestling The Undertaker, Batista's not in the main event of WrestleMania. John Cena, more than likely, or The Undertaker, will close WrestleMania. over the years, there have been bigger matches than the title matches. Okay, so people getting all up in arms about Batista headlining WrestleMania. He might be in one of the featured matches. That doesn't mean he's in the main event. I happen to believe that John Cena will headline WrestleMania like he normally does. Whoever he wrestles, if it's Bray Wyatt, if it's somebody else, fine. But I believe John Cena or maybe The Undertaker will headline WrestleMania. So, or Daniel Bryan, as my wife just said. I don't believe Batista. Well, I don't believe that match is going on last for a number of different reasons. You don't want a Triple H Chris Jericho situation from WrestleMania 18 again. But the thing with Punk, one thing I want to make clear is everybody just take a chill pill. Stop jumping on Twitter and going, don't, just leave it alone because we don't know. You can read all the reports, all the blogs, all the breaking news from all the sites. We don't know what's going on. So just take a step back. I feel for the guy because I used to wrestle. Granted, I never wrestled the schedule WWE does, or, never. But I understand it takes a toll on your body. CM Punk's done it a lot more than I had. Done it a lot better. It takes a toll on your body. Just give it time, people. Hopefully things will work out. I like CM Punk. I think there's a lot of kids that want to see CM Punk wrestle. And I respect WWE. I hope it gets worked out for a number of different reasons. He's still under contract till July. I don't see Vince McMahon just letting him go without a fight. I do know Vince is already working on getting this thing resolved and getting Punk back. So, yeah, hopefully things get worked out. And one more thing, if you're an independent company, no matter what independent company you are, and you go on Twitter and you say CM Punk statement, that looks ridiculous. The only statement I want to see about CM Punk is from the company he currently works for, which is World Wrestling Entertainment. Everybody else using this as a segue to promote something, it's asinine. Leave it alone. Promote your stuff based on what you've done and not jumping on a bandwagon on what's hot right now. So, okay, I'm stepping on my soapbox. I like to stay on my soapbox, Michael, because it makes me taller. So, yeah.
I'll let you get away with that. That's fine. But a question I have, you're bringing up Batista and not in the main event. It's going to be this. I don't see John Cena versus Bray Wyatt making WrestleMania a main event. Undertaker versus Brock Lesnar? Maybe. But you got to work something else on the flip side here, because another piece of news that's coming out. Once again, possibly, Sting is talking to WWE. Everybody wants to see Sting versus Undertaker. You think that's something that might make it into the main event in time? Personally, I don't. I think too soon.
Go ahead, Michael. I'm sorry. I didn't know you were. Go ahead.
I think it's a little too soon to see that being a main event match yet for WrestleMania. I hope they sign him, but I don't see him facing Undertaker yet. So if you can't use Batista versus Randy Orton as your main event, because in my opinion that's going to take a colossal crap, you can't really do John Cena versus Bray Wyatt, because although Bray Wyatt had an excellent match with Daniel Bryan on Sunday night, I don't think he's main event for WrestleMania quality yet. That leaves Lesnar and Undertaker, but we're not guaranteed that match is happening yet, because as always, there's no Undertaker match until probably a month before. When the bell goes off, Undertaker comes out, does the slash across his throat, and he picks his opponent. So where are they going to go with this main event? We know at one point CM Punk was scheduled to be the one to face Triple H. Maybe CM Punk quitting WWE is setting up that match. There's a lot of variables we got to think about here, but you got to determine what's going to be the main event of WrestleMania and what's going to sell.
I agree with you 100%. And let me retort. Bray Wyatt, I believe, is a main event player, and I believe how Bray Wyatt gets to be that is by being in a main event with John Cena. I think it'll be fine. I understand what you're saying, and there will be a lot of gambling involved. But I think Bray Wyatt is the type of performer, and John Cena has many people, as they don't like Cena. Cena brings out the best in everybody. Cena will take that kid in a big game, big fight situation, and he will ride it through. Now, they've got all these plans. They want to get Hulk Hogan involved with Bray Wyatt and John Cena. and that would be money. There's a lot of different things they could add to that to make it a selling point. Over the years, the name WrestleMania has been the draw. Not necessarily what goes on last, because it's supposed to be a combination of matches. So usually 4 or 5 matches will all be big matches, and usually they build up. You get 4 or 5 different main events, and in their minds it doesn't matter what goes on last. Over the years, we've seen matches like Hulk Hogan and The Rock that should have gone on last. Ric Flair and Shawn Michaels, Undertaker, Shawn Michaels at WrestleMania 25, which should have been the main event. No reason for it not to be. Over the years, we've seen matches that should have been the main event of that show and weren't for whatever reason. I think Bray Wyatt is building up such a, I don't know what the word I'm looking for is, reputation of being so different. I think he'll be okay, and it depends on how you build that match. I think you could do the Shield versus the Wyatt family as a main event of WrestleMania, and everybody would be happy. But us as wrestling fans, we get a Christmas gift next month because we get the Wyatt family in the Shield at the Elimination Chamber. And that right there has the possibility to be the match of the year. We also don't know what Roman Reigns is going to do at WrestleMania, and I think he had the breakout performance on Sunday. People want to bash the Rumble, but look at how many young stars got to shine on Sunday. Bray Wyatt went 20 minutes with Daniel Bryan, went over. The Shield all stayed in the Royal Rumble. Seth Rollins stayed in there for over 40 minutes. Roman Reigns hung to the very end. The Wyatt family, John Cena, they all had big performances in the Rumble. Alexander Rusev from NXT had a wonderful debut. Antonio Cesaro looked strong in the Rumble. Now he's going to be in the Elimination Chamber for the World Heavyweight title. So I don't think the future has ever looked so bright for WWE. For as many things as they do wrong, I firmly believe they are really working hard, and I think the in-ring product is better than it's been in years. They've got so many good guys on the undercard that are working their butts off to get a shot. So for as many things, Batista going over, that lets a sour taste in people's mouths, but they are really trying to get new stars over. And I think if people say they're not, I think they're jaded. I think they're, I don't think they're seeing it. And as far as Sting goes, yes, let's sign Sting, but let's sign Sting for a different reason. Let's sign Sting because, number one, he's never been there. He's 55 years old. There's not much you can get out of Sting. But let Sting go in there and have a 6-man with the Shield. Give those guys the rub. Let Sting go in there and work with Bray Wyatt and give him the rub. Let Sting do what he's been doing for TNA, and let's get him in the Hall of Fame. Let's get a real DVD out on him. Let's have him be an ambassador for the network. And maybe next year we get Sting and The Undertaker. I don't know how good that match is going to be because The Undertaker, I think he's 49 years old. The Undertaker thrives on working younger guys that'll push him, like CM Punk, like Shawn Michaels. Hunter and Taker, they worked more of a physical match that told a great story. But Taker likes working the young guys because he thrives off that. And I don't think that's there with Sting. I could be wrong. I think Sting's still an incredible performer, and I have nothing bad to say about Sting. I hope they do sign him. He's never been there, and if he's going to hang it up, everybody needs to quit. Everybody needs to retire in the WWE. No offense to any other company, but that place will do everyone justice as far as retiring. Look at Ric Flair.
You can look at Ric Flair. One thing we haven't discussed yet, though, you got to remember, any match of the main event of WrestleMania, we've seen this too many times, there's a yes movement. We know what the yes movement is. We've seen the fans do it before, and if they don't do something right this time, you could see fans turn at WrestleMania and create a bigger scene than what they did at the Rumble on the biggest stage of all. Because the yes movement right now is huge. I'm not a big fan of the term yes movement, but we'll go with it. But I have not seen anything like Daniel Bryan I can't think of it all. I don't know anybody that's created this type of phenomenon that Daniel Bryan has created. Went from being the guy on NXT that was humiliated by, I believe his coach was The Miz, went from that to choking Justin Roberts with a tie on Raw, getting fired, Cena brings him back, teams with Kane as hell no, comes up, now he is probably the biggest superstar in the company right now. In my opinion, biggest one right now. John Cena, Randy Orton, all them, no, Daniel Bryan. He's got to factor into WrestleMania somewhere. If he doesn't, the crowd will take over again, in my opinion. And this could make Vince and the WWE look really, really bad.
You're right. You are absolutely right. They hijacked the show they have hijacked the show several times. They did it in Seattle the night they had the championship ascension ceremony. And that creates moments. But you're right, Michael. And I think Stevie Wonder could see what you're saying. They do have to do something. I believe they started to appease people on Monday. They had Daniel Bryan in the opening segment, and they had him close out their show in one of the best matches they've ever had on Monday Night Raw. I do believe I'm not mad about Daniel Bryan not winning the Rumble. You know why? Because I didn't expect him to be in the Royal Rumble, because I get it. I do think this is a part of the storyline. I think the machine kicks you down, and when he does get the run, and he will, it'll be greater. Now, you can't hold it out too long because then people get pissed and they stop watching, and that's the one cardinal rule. I did read a piece of information today online that stated that Extreme Rules, which is the pay-per-view right after WrestleMania, was moved from its original location to Seattle, Washington. Now, the last time they were in Seattle was the final Raw before TLC during the Championship Ascension ceremony when the fans hijacked the final segment. So, one would have to believe that Daniel Bryan is going to be a very key player on that pay-per-view, considering it is in his backyard, since Aberdeen, I'm not a geographical expert, I believe Aberdeen is pretty close to Seattle. Well, if anything, they're in the same state. So Daniel Bryan has to be a fixture on that show. What Daniel Bryan's going to do at WrestleMania, nobody knows. Is he going to wrestle Triple H? Is he going to be the WWE World Heavyweight Champion? Is he going to win the Elimination Chamber? The thing about WWE is sometimes you can predict what happens, but every now and then they'll throw you a curveball. They're not stupid. They see what's going on. And they had to rewrite Monday Night Show because they were worried about the fans hijacking. So I believe fans, if you're a Daniel Bryan fan and you want to be heard when you go to these shows, keep doing what you're doing. And eventually somebody's got to say creative, hey, when are we going to talk about the elephant in the room? You know, the elephant that takes his two arms, points them up with their fingers up in the air? That elephant. What are we going to do about that? And they cannot be ignored for long. They couldn't ignore it when Steve Austin was coming up in 1996. And that's the last time I firmly believe that there was a phenomenon like this. I firmly believe the Yes Movement and the Stone Cold era are one and the same. Very exciting time. And again, Daniel Bryan, I'm so happy for him. He's a man's man. He's a wrestler. And he is making more money now than he ever has. He's in love with the woman of his dreams. Hey, man, that guy's in the best place of his life right now, and I couldn't be happier. Couldn't happen to a nicer guy.
I agree with that. I am an Austin fan. I do remember Austin 316. I remember the speech at the King of the Ring. I remember everybody had an Austin 316 T-shirt. I had an Austin 316 T-shirt. I have a Respect the Beard T-shirt. I will admit I am a Daniel Bryan fan. I'm not going to go to a show and chant. Yes, I just don't chant. But I still think that Daniel Bryan is bigger than Austin 316 was. I know it's hard to believe. I think Daniel Bryan has taken it up one step further, because what Daniel Bryan has that Austin didn't is the social media, the Twitters, the Facebooks, on it. Austin didn't have that. Daniel Bryan has a whole movement that is spreading out over social media, just like our show is. We're spreading it out over social media to get the people to listen in, to get the people to call in. Daniel Bryan's got social media to promote this Yes Movement and get the fans on his side. Austin didn't have that.
I agree with you. One quick comment, and then I believe Michael's on the line. Yes, you're right. There are parts of Daniel Bryan's current run that were not present during Stone Cold's era. I think Austin will always be considered bigger because his success equals box office and buy rate and merchandise. Not to say to what Daniel Bryan's doing won't lead to that. It's different eras. It's apples and oranges. But yes, right now Daniel Bryan is the hottest commodity in professional wrestling. For anybody to say otherwise is jaded, I firmly believe. So you are right in that respect. I do believe we do have a caller on. Is this Michael Elliott?
Yeah, man. How's it going? By the way, who was Daniel Bryan?
Touche, sir. Touche. Mike McCurdy, go ahead and take this over. Tell our guest who Michael is and start the interview, please.
I think I can do that. For those of you who don't know, Michael Elliott is the director of the Jim Crockett Promotions DVD, which I just happened to watch this past weekend. He's also put out the NWA History and Tradition DVD, as well as Woo Mercy, the Jimmy Valiant story, and is currently working on a documentary on probably one of the best tag teams of the 80s, the Rock and Roll Express. Michael Elliott, how are you doing tonight?
Oh, mustache. I feel good, Daddy. How you doing, man? That's my bad Jimmy Valiant impression. That's the last impression you'll hear of me. But doing good tonight. Thank you guys for having me on this show and helping promote this new documentary we're working on.
No problem. We're glad to have you on. So, Michael, why don't you give us a little background here? How did you get started in doing the documentaries, the wrestling ones? Because I believe I've listed them all, so this would be, Rock and Roll Express would be your fourth, correct?
Yeah, it'll be the fourth one that we're producing. I got my start at the NWA Legends Fan Fest here in Charlotte, North Carolina, where I met, Jimmy Valiant back in 2009, and we became pretty good friends. We hit it off, and we just chatted through emails. And my day job that people don't understand is that I work in a television station, so I've been doing that for 10 years of my life. So that's where I learned about production and producing good quality stuff. But I started chatting with Jimmy, and I was like, man, I want to do something wrestling related. And Jimmy's such a cool guy if you guys have never met him. But he said, yeah, brother, let's do this. And a year later, there was Woo Mercy, the Jimmy Valiant experience, and that's how I got my start doing these and telling the history of the business and wanting to continue doing that.
So Woo Mercy, Jimmy Valiant story was the first. You followed that up with the history and tradition of the NWA, correct?
That's right. And that one came about just by curiosity on my end. I grew up on Jim Crockett Promotions, which we'll probably talk about, but that's what I grew up on watching. And, the NWA World title was the title for them, and it was the world title. And WWE produced a documentary about the history of the World Heavyweight Championship, and I thought it was great. I mean, everything they do, they put out is top-notch. But I was like, where's the NWA title really at now? And because it's still out there, and I knew about it, and when I found it, I was like, I want to track it to today from where it started in Iowa all the way up until today. And when we produced that documentary, Scrap Iron Adam Pearce was the champion, and I thought that was a really good product that we put out on that, and I think people really appreciated that history lesson that we produced.
Well, I know I'm looking forward to receiving my copies. I just ordered the Jimmy Valiant story as well as History and Tradition, so I'm looking forward to seeing those. I did just this weekend get a chance to sit down and watch Jim Crockett Promotions, The Good Old Days. Very good film. I enjoyed it. I got to say, it kept my attention, learned a few things and all that. Now, that one was just named the Best Wrestling DVD of 2013 by Wrestling Observer. So why don't you tell us a little more of the story of Jim Crockett Promotions, The Good Old Days, and then we'll talk a little bit more about your next project.
Yeah, man, that award was a huge honor. It's the first independent wrestling documentary to win that award. The first one to beat out a WWE-produced documentary that has won that award for the last 9 years. So that was really a huge honor, and grateful that the people voted for us on that one. But, Jim Crockett Promotions, The Good Old Days, which you can order at High Spot. Man, it was a massive amount of work to cover a 50-year character. It was 50 years of wrestling to cover, and I felt like we did a very, very good job in about 2 hours and 10 minutes of covering that. And the thing that made that documentary so much better was finally getting to sit down with Jim Crockett Jr., David Crockett, and their brother Jackie Crockett, and they took that documentary to another level with their insight, because David and Jim have done stuff with WWE, but for the first time in 25 years, that was the first time they really sat down and really just spilled it on the table. And I thought that was what really made that documentary be better than what it was going to be.
Well, I definitely enjoyed it. One of the things I noticed about it, though, that I really enjoyed was that a lot of times when you see DVDs or any history of, they will tend to build them up and show you all the high points. They don't show you everything. They'll gloss over some of the negative sides of that. But you didn't do that in this one. You talked about the plane crash back in 1970. You talked about Magnum TA's car accident. These were all major events in the Jim Crockett promotions. But there were so many other things. It was also covered was Black Saturday, was when WWF, Vince McMahon, took over the wrestling time slot and all that. You only had a 2.5 hour, I believe, time frame. Was there any point in time where you felt you weren't able to cover everything? Was there more you wanted to cover? Was there anything you had to cut?
Oh, yeah. There was a good 45 minutes that I had to cut out of the finished product. I wish there was a way I could release an extended version of it. But, yeah, there was so much. Like I said, it was 50 years. Can you imagine condensing 50 years down into 2 hours and making it, as accurate as possible and hitting all the main points and the small points that mattered? Obviously, there was stuff that I wish I could have added and kept in there, but with time constraints, people can only hold their attention for so long. I don't think you can release a 7-hour documentary and people sit down and watch it all the way through and be like, man, that was awesome. But yeah, I mean, there was so much stuff that we probably could have covered, but like you said, due to making it a DVD, we did what we did, and people obviously have enjoyed it over the last 6 months. We've gotten nothing but positive reviews, and that makes me proud.
Let me jump in here real quick. Michael Elliott is a lifelong fan of our business, and our business, all three of us, because we are a part of this business. That's why I say our business. What Michael was able to do, instead of starting a promotion, making himself the champion, which is what so many people do, and they're like, I love the business. Michael probably made a decision about, well, I can get into professional wrestling, I can train, or I can do something else and achieve something maybe even greater. And that's what he did, is he took his passion for wrestling and used it to make documentaries and used it to make films to educate wrestling fans, maybe about stuff they didn't know about or stuff that was waxed over in bigger releases. So I think Michael has to be given a lot of credit, because so many people would just buy a pair of cheap golf pants from Hot Topic, go buy some kick pads, and these days you don't even need to go through wrestling school. You can just go on social media and say, I was trained by so-and-so, and start working shows. It's not like you need anything to work shows these days. But what Michael did was he for the respect he has for this business, he didn't do that. He went in another direction, and it's great because, man, so many people are getting to see this. He's putting a lot of work into this. He's not doing it for the money. He's doing it for the love of professional wrestling. He's doing these Kickstarter campaigns just to make it to where he can do these documentaries. So I think it's great, Michael. And, I need to sit down and watch the Jim Crockett Promotions documentary, because Johnny Valentine broke me into the wrestling business. And as everybody knows, or they should know, Johnny was involved in the 1975 plane crash that broke his back and paralyzed him. So I need to sit down and watch that, because, I was one of Johnny's last students, and I was with him right up until he passed away. So I need to sit down and watch that. But I've heard nothing but rave reviews as well. So, again, I can't thank you enough, as somebody who loves the business as well, for what you've been able to do. And you, every now and then, you'll send me a YouTube video. And I'm just amazed, because you got the Rock and Roll Express documentary on tap. And then you're sending me stuff about the Fullers in Alabama. Yes, Ron Fuller is my uncle. No, I'm kidding.
Oh,
come on, folks. Just kidding. Don't write me. Don't tweet me. It's just amazing. And you have a gift. You have a gift in filmmaking, and you're using that to with your love of pro wrestling. So I think everybody should commend you for that.
Well, thank you. I don't think anybody wants to see me in a pair of tights if you know what I look like. Well, I appreciate those words, and if you were one of Johnny Valentine's students, you'll definitely love this documentary. There's a whole chapter dedicated to Johnny Valentine and the Wahoo McDaniel feud because if you know Mid-Atlantic history, those two guys came into this territory and changed it overnight. Not overnight, but they worked really hard to change this territory, and there's a whole chapter dedicated to that. And with that plane crash, if that didn't happen, I mean, would Ric Flair have ever gone on to be at the star that he was? Because at that time, Johnny was the top guy for the Crockett's. So there were two major moments for the Crockett. And I'm also glad you mentioned that I'm not a rich man. I don't have a whole lot of money, and we're doing the Kickstarter because we're at the point with the Rock and Roll Express documentary that we need this kickstart from the fans to get us to where we can take this to the next level, and we're hoping to do another 3-disc set, just as good a quality as the Crockett Promotions, with the nice cover and the packaging that the WWE type level. We want to continue to do that, and my passion, like you said, is to tell the history, to preserve the sport of professional wrestling's history, and that's what I hope to continue to do. And after Rock and Roll, I've already set up another one that hopefully will come to fruition as we're in talks with Harley Race to produce his life story next. But
that's
main
awesome.
focus is, yeah. But our main focus
I got a Johnny Valentine story real quick. People who don't know Johnny or don't know his aura, Johnny was tough, and his biggest thing is that he beat people up. And when he got in the ring, he beat the living tar out of people. So I go to train with Johnny. I think it's my first or second day in school, and Scott Putsky's there, and a couple other local wrestlers are there. And I'm not a big guy. Anybody's ever seen me? Like, no, I'm not a big guy. But Johnny agreed to train me after I bugged him. He's like, all right, I'll train you. Fine. You're never going to make it as a wrestler, but I'll train you. So anyway, so Johnny was paralyzed. He was on crutches. But Johnny had these massive arms. He still had these massive arms. So Johnny would do a drill. He'd do a forearm drill. Everybody would come and stand by Johnny as he was sitting in his chair. He would bend the guy over, and he would hit you with a forearm, just like he did back in the day. Well, all these guys were bigger than me. So he hits me with the forearm. I go face first to the floor, just boom, like somebody shot me. Get up, got blood coming out of my nose. I knocked a couple teeth out. And everyone, there's a bunch of grown men around. I'm 16 at the time. Everybody's waiting for me to cry. Everybody's waiting for me to burst out in tears. And I didn't. I don't think I knew what day it was. And I think that's the only reason why I didn't. And then Johnny told me, go to the bathroom, get cleaned up, came out, shook my hand. He said, you might be somebody. He said, I don't know if you'll make it as a wrestler. You might make a good promoter. He said, but I'll teach you. He said, but because to be a good promoter, you got to know everything. And I spoke at his memorial service, and we inducted him into the IHWE Hall of Fame in 2010. His wife Sharon, she passed away a couple of years ago. She showed up, and in front of the whole crowd, she said that Hall of Fame meant more to her and more to Johnny than any other Hall of Fame he had been inducted into. And she hugged me that night, and she told me Johnny would be proud of me, and I had a really special relationship with him, and but that's how Johnny was. So, I mean, anybody who's a Johnny Valentine fan, you need to get this DVD, especially to see the history of him and Wahoo, because Johnny used to tell me stories. He really respected Wahoo. There was a lot of people Johnny didn't like, and he really raved about Wahoo, and two of the greatest of all time. Never will be an era like those guys. Those guys were tough as nails, and they would never get on Facebook and talk. They would never do that. They were about drawing money. They were about respect, and that is.
Amen. He made you believe. That's for sure.
So, well, tell us about the Rock and Roll Express. Tell us about why you doing it on the Rock and Roll Express. I mean, obviously, for people who follow this business, we don't need the reason, but just for the normal fans out there, why the Rock and Roll Express? What's the goal here? And folks, if you'll go to Facebook.com/IHWE Pro Wrestling, either right after this show's over with, the campaign will be up on the page. It'll be the latest post, the Kickstarter link, and you can click on it. They've got some amazing perks. Go contribute. Make this happen. Get the story out. Go ahead, Michael.
Well, why do anything? We are trying to do documentaries that WWE is not going to produce. We're trying to tell the stories of the wrestlers that are not going to get their story told by Vince McMahon or WWE. Jimmy Valiant will never get his story done. The NWA title, obviously, today will never get told where it's at today. There's a good possibility that Jim Crockett Promotions will get done. I don't know why they haven't done it yet. They're sitting on a gold mine, and the Rock and Roll Express will never get their due by WWE. I hope someday they do. They deserve it. In my opinion, and this is just my opinion, I think they're the greatest tag team of all time. Certainly very, very popular everywhere they went, sold out a lot of venues. But, Ricky and Robert have done a lot of shoot interviews and shoot tapes over the years. But what we're doing with these guys is completely different than anything you've heard in a shoot interview that they've done or an interview on the Internet. We're talking more about, it's going to be a healthy dose of their wrestling career, obviously, but we're diving more into what their relationship was really like. How could you be together with a guy for 30 years as a tag team and not have issues? But we're also talking about the lifestyle that they led outside of the ring. Ricky Morton said to me when we did interview him, he said it was all there, the sex and the drugs and the Rock and Roll Express. We were rock stars and we didn't even know it. And that's kind of where we're going. It's going to be a little bit of a different twist than the last three documentaries we've done. But, there'll be the wrestling there, obviously. But, that's where we're heading, and I think people will be very, very pleased if this project gets taken to the next level with their support.
Awesome. Okay, and okay, folks, if you're just listening, Facebook.com/IHWE Pro Wrestling. If you're a fan of the Facebook page or you're not, go to it now, and the link has just been posted for the Kickstarter campaign. How many days are left on that, Michael?
We have about 17 days right now. 16 days probably in a few hours. But we have 16 days left, and we are only 36% funded. I think we're about $5,000 short of the funding goal. We're asking for $7,500 to produce this, and I'm actually going to put a video up later this week explaining to people where your money is going and why we need this money. It's the bare minimum that we need to produce another top-quality product like the Jim Crockett Promotions documentary. And I think people will be very pleased if they give us a look. There's some great perks. If you look to the right of the screen, there's all kinds of levels you can contribute at. I think people will be very pleased if they give us a look and give us a chance. We're not high spots or RF Video, but we're better than that. But, yeah, just go to Kickstarter, look up Rock and Roll, go to the Facebook page, check out the link, and check out the perks, and just give us a chance. I think you'll be very, very pleased with what we do.
All right, guys, sorry about that for a second. The wonders of live radio. I had to step out for just a moment. Didn't want to interrupt David and his story about Johnny Valentine, nor did I interrupt Michael talking about the documentary there. I went to your Kickstarter page. So I was looking at the different donation levels you can do. You definitely have a lot of variations on it. Myself, personally, I am going to donate $100 towards the documentary. At this point in time, that's the best I can do. If I could do better, I would. I am going to help out, though, as much as I can. I'm not going to put him on the spot, but if my co-host wants to kind of kick in a little bit, maybe he could match me on that. Maybe we can get you going.
Hey, man.
I just had a baby.
Yeah.
Killing me.
I got 3.
Man.
I got 3.
Yeah, but I just had 1, and I have 4 stepkids. It's the codfish over here. And my wife just said, "You mean I just had a baby?" Yes, correct. I retract my statement. Correct. No, I will be contributing before the Kickstarter's over with.
Whatever anybody, either one of you guys can contribute, or anybody out there listening can contribute. We are very, very thankful, and whatever you guys can do. And David, I understand the situation you're in, having a baby. It's rough. It's rough at the start, but it gets easier. But it's anything you guys can do. We're very, very appreciative of it.
Definitely.
You got it, man. I'm glad to help out. Sorry, David, didn't mean to put you on the spot there, but I had to have a little fun.
All right.
Believe me, I do understand. Having to come up with $100 is a little bit kind of tight too, but we'll do our best. Anyways, you mentioned you wanted to do a documentary on Harley Race's career. Are there any other projects you've got kind of in the back of your mind, or any projects that you want to do eventually down the road?
Oh, man, yeah, I have a whole list of, dream projects I'd love to work on. I can just name a couple of them if you like. I'm really, really pressing Jim Cornette to work with me on a Smoky Mountain Wrestling documentary. I think people would be very interested in that. It was kind of one of the last territories to be around before none of them existed. I'm also working on trying to do a Georgia Championship Wrestling documentary. And I'd also like to do the Continental Southeastern, the Fuller's territory, because a lot of people have forgotten about those guys, and they had a lot of great wrestling in their territory. That's just a few. If I was rich, I would have probably produced 25 of these already.
Yeah, I can understand that one. I'm working on the encyclopedia for WCCW, and it's all funded out of my pocket. I haven't tried a Kickstarter, anything like that, which is another question for my own personal interest, and maybe a few people out there that maybe think they've got an idea they'd like to try. Just how does the Kickstarter campaign work? How do you get one started, and how does it work in the end? If you receive the money that you need to make your project, how does it go from there? I'm new to Kickstarter. I don't quite understand the whole way it works.
Well, it's basically Kickstarter is all or nothing. So in 16 days, if we don't have the funding goal, nobody gets charged. Your credit card does not get charged until the funding period ends. So if you contribute today $100, you're not going to get your charge on your credit card until the funding comes through. So if we come up short, we won't have the funding, and the documentary will be put on the shelf for at least 2 to 3 more years until I can fund it myself. But basically, you go to Kickstarter, you tell them what kind of a project you're doing, and they look it over and they approve it, and then you launch it. You have to give perks, different tiers for contributions, and people get stuff in return. You're not just giving money and getting nothing back. And for us, we have a track record of producing these documentaries, so I hope people would feel more comfortable with contributing to us, because obviously we're not going to take your money and run. We're going to produce a top-notch quality documentary about, like I said, in my opinion, the greatest tag team of all time. And Kickstarter is, I think people are a little weary of it, or people are just last-minute contributors. But as the guy running the Kickstarter, it's kind of like, man, are people not into this project or what? But it's been slow for us, but I think it'll come through in the end.
So have all the other projects... Sorry.
No, go ahead, Mike.
Well, I was wondering, has of all the other projects, other than just the Jim... I know Jim Crockett Promotions was through Kickstarter. Was the Jimmy Valiant story as well as the NWA also through there as well?
The Jimmy Valiant, and this is what was neat about the Jimmy Valiant documentary, was that nobody charged me for an interview to talk about Jimmy Valiant, because I don't know if either one of you have met him, but he is the nicest guy in the whole world, and nobody in wrestling has a bad thing to say about him. So all those guys were happy to be a part of it. They wanted to be a part of it, and I didn't have to do any spending out of my own pocket except for travel and to produce the documentary. And the NWA thing was very, very cheap to produce. When you're working with independent wrestlers, a lot of them are just wanting the exposure, so it was kind of the same type of deal. But when you're dealing with guys from Jim Crockett Promotions and and people that were involved in that era that were big stars. With the shoot interview that started coming around years ago, they were getting paid to do these things. And so now guys want to be paid, and some guys ask for a lot of money, and some guys don't. That's the reason why I'm going through Kickstarter with these things now.
I wanted to get one plug in for real quick before we let you go. The same man who's awesome, who does all the IHWE graphics, does the graphics for Michael's projects, Iron Skull Productions. And Michael, for anybody who doesn't know about Iron Skull, I can rave about him all day. Tell people about Iron Skull and how good he is.
Well, this is the first time I'm working with Iron Skull Productions. If you go to the Kickstarter page, you'll see the Crockett Diaries. That's the first project he's done for me. It's the first time I've been working with him, but he does amazing work. He's really quick with it, and it's professionally done. And I'm planning on working with him more here regularly. Hopefully, if this thing gets done, and I'll be able to afford him to do the artwork for the Rock and Roll Express documentary. But yeah, he's great. Jazz is awesome, and you can go check his artwork out on the Kickstarter page with the Crockett Diaries.
Yes, indeed. Well, do you have anything you want to say to the fans listening?
Just go to your Facebook page, the IHWE Facebook page, click on the link, and if you can't get there, just go straight to Kickstarter, type in Wrestling, Rock and Roll Express, or whatever, and find the project, and just check it out, and give us a contribution, give us a chance, and you'll be happy with the finished product.
I think all the fans out there listening will be more than happy to help with that. At least I hope they will. And, Michael, if you can send me a link to that page, I will be more than happy to post that for you on my encyclopedia page, and I will do anything I can to help promote this project as well as making that $100 donation that I just mentioned.
Well, yeah, man, thanks for having me on and helping me get the word out.
Thank you for joining us, Michael. We'll have you back on. We'll keep in touch, and we'll have you back on, hopefully, once production begins, and you can keep everybody kind of informed of what's going on and whatnot. And we'd love to have the Rock and Roll Express on sometime, so if you can arrange that, or Jimmy Valiant, we would be very grateful.
Yeah, I'll shoot you some information after the show, but yeah, and then if you contribute to the Kickstarter, that's another way you'll be able to keep up with updates as the production continues. But and obviously, I'd love to come back on and talk wrestling some more, guys.
Anytime, man. We'd be glad to have you on, and we'll make sure to plug the Rock and Roll Express documentary on Kickstarter for you. When's the cutoff date for donations?
February 16th, but it doesn't hurt to get them in before then.
February 16th. We got a couple more shows before that. We'll be more than happy to plug that for you, Michael. We'll see what we can do to help you get this project going.
All right, thank you, guys.
Thank you, guys. Have a good one, man. All right. Well, that was Michael Elliott. He is he's the guy behind these wonderful documentaries, the Jim Carter Promotions, the Jimmy Valiant story, the Crockett Diaries, and he's currently trying to get funding for the Rock and Roll Forever, a story about, he says, the greatest tag team in history. That's hard to argue. One of the greatest tag teams in history, the Rock and Roll Express. Awesome guy, and, man, I got to see that Jim Carter Promotions thing. Especially if he talks about Johnny Valentine. That is spectacular. That is very, very cool. All right, well, we got a few minutes, ladies and gentlemen. So James Beard will be joining us here shortly. James Beard he's been involved in so many different wrestling promotions over the years in so many different capacities. He's a 2013 IHWE Texas Wrestling Hall of Famer. And last week he just released what will hopefully be the first in a series of books about his years in professional wrestling. Before James calls in, Michael, is there anything you want to chat about?
Well, I think one thing we need to cover tonight is the upcoming guests for the next few weeks. Next week we have February 5th. That's correct, right date? Yes. February 5th, we've got Bruce Hart who's going to be joining us on the show the first hour. We're also going to be joined by Billy Anderson. He was a wrestling star here in California. He helped train with Red Bastien. Didn't train with Red Bastien, but was one of Red Bastien's trainers, was a partner of his. he was actually one of the first trainers for Sting and the Ultimate Warrior. I showed you that picture just a few days ago, one of the groups he was with. So that'll be a fun show. Also, February 12th, we've got Rob Schamberger coming on. I don't believe we have a second guest that night, though, do we?
Not
do we have
yet,
anything else
play it.
February 12th?
We'll play it by ear.
Sounds good. And then, of course, February 19th, you just announced this a few days ago. It has been confirmed Kevin Von Erich will be our guest that night. His family is going into the IHWE Hall of Fame in 2015. Kevin will be joining us on February 19th to talk about that, talk about World Class, talk about the Von Erichs, talk about the Freebirds, who we just learned last week. Michael Hayes will be receiving the Zoo Fez Award at this year's Cauliflower Alley reunion. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, just had a grandchild born yesterday.
Yes.
Another grandson, I think.
The Von Erich family.
So that'll be another interview.
To the Von Erich family. Yeah, it will be a real good one. And I believe more likely we're going to keep that night open just for Kevin. We're going to work on what my goal is to have the whole show and for people to be able to call in and actually talk to Kevin. It shouldn't be a problem. I just got to work it out with Kevin's team. And the plan is hopefully to keep the whole show open that night for Kevin. I believe that'll also be the week before the WWE Network begins. We'll be talking about that. I want to talk about that real quick. People, I'm a consumer. It's not my multi-billion-dollar company. So I'm not going to, send out a release saying I think it's stupid, I think it devalues. It's not my company. I'm a consumer, and the only money I got to worry about is the $10 I'm spending every month for it. It just seems like everybody's got an opinion, and they're tweeting about it or posting blogs about it. I think nowadays, if it doesn't concern you, why even bother? I think consumers should be happy. Forever long it lasts. Enjoy it while you can. I'm going to be getting it. It's great for historians, for people like you and me. Time will tell how successful it is. I don't think they're just going to shut it down after a year. I believe they're in it for at least 5 years. And I think they have very smart people on the financial side of the company that have looked at the worst possible situation and the best possible situation. So, everybody chiming in saying, oh, this, that, and everybody's entitled to their opinion. I'm not saying nobody can talk about it. But, I don't work for the WWE. I'm not their CFO. I'm not a shareholder. So, for me, it's $10 a month. That's all I'm concerned with. I can handle that. I'm looking forward to it. I think it's really good for wrestling fans.
Well, unfortunately, that is one of the negative parts of having social media, is that everybody has now an opportunity. They have a soapbox, as you said, jump on it, make them feel a little taller. Sorry, made the short joke. But
all right.
To speak their mind, to come out there, let them think, let them feel like they got something important to say, let them feel that, everybody's going to listen to my opinions, they're going to agree with me, I'm going to be the next, Dave Meltzer, I'm going to be the next, when in reality, there's just one of hundreds of thousands of other people that all have an opinion. We all know the statement. Opinions are like, well, we'll keep that clean. This is a family show. Everybody's got one. A lot of them stink. It gives everybody a chance up there. Everybody thinks they're big now. My personal opinion on WWE Network, I'm like you. I'm going to buy it. If anything, you're going to get the pay-per-views. You're paying $10 a month as compared to, $45 a month now for the regular shows and like $60 for WrestleMania?
55
right there,
for HD. 55 for HD. That's before
I
WrestleMania.
don't do
65. 65 for HD in WrestleMania. 55 for all the others in HD, and 45 for standard.
Standard, yeah. That right alone makes it worth it. And then you're going to have access to all the pay-per-views, WWF, WCW, ECW. If you actually look at the network thing, when Michael Cole does his little presentation of it, if you're scrolling on the bottom where it says shows, I saw it. The World Class Championship Wrestling logo is in there. Makes me think they've got the library. You're going to be able to watch the WCCW shows from back in the 80s. That's what I'm hoping. I'm hoping I don't click on it and just see the WWE documentary they did. It was good, but I want to see more. So I'm curious on that. You get a week's free trial. You can't complain about getting a free trial week. You don't like it, you don't pay for it. But you got a week to check it out. That right there. Watch it, try it out. I see something new in the store, I look at it and go, oh, that looks interesting. I'm not going to get it, though. That's going to be stupid. I'll try it. If I don't like it, I don't get it again. Same thing with the WWE Network. You got a free trial week, check it out, see what they got to offer, see what everything's out there. Do you like it? Great, go ahead and get it. If you're already getting the stinking pay-per-view every month and you're shelling out your $45 to your cable company or your DirecTV or your Dish Network, now you're only paying $10. Fair deal. Unless you're one of these guys that sits in front of their computer and streams it off the internet from one of those sites that are way over there in the UK and you're watching them for free. You're already cheap. You're probably not going to pay the $10 a week, and I don't really think the WWE cares too much because you're already ripping them off anyway.
I believe, okay. Are you there?
Yes.
Okay, James, you're there?
Yes, I am.
Okay, I think Michael got cut off, so, okay, call back in. It's live radio, ladies and gentlemen. Well, I can take this. I'm a promoter. Some people may say differently. Okay, I'm waiting for my host to call in. Are we? Okay, yeah, the host is disconnected. Okay, we're still live. Okay. On the phone with me right now, we'll wait for Michael to get back on. On the phone with me right now is, like I said, 2013 Texas Wrestling Hall of Famer. He's worked for World Class Championship Wrestling. He's worked for the USWA. He's worked for Global Wrestling Federation. He's worked for numerous different promotions in the Dallas-Fort Worth area over the years. He's worked for promotions all over the country over the years. He had a stint in Japan. He's worked in the offices. He's worked for the World Wrestling Federation. He's worked for just about anybody that's ever put on a major product in the States and in Japan. He is the one and only James Beard. James, welcome to IHWE Radio.
Well, thank you, David. Glad to be here.
Okay. So, Michael, are you here?
Yeah, I'm here. Once again, the wonders of live radio. When you're using a headset, don't hit the button on the side by accident. It disconnects the phone call.
Okay, well, our guest is on, and I've already introduced him, so why don't you go ahead and start?
How you doing tonight, James?
I'm doing good, Michael. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. Got my copy of your book last night. Had a chance to sit through and leaf through it a little bit. Liked what I've read so far. Very good. You should be proud of that. Looking forward to actually being able to read it from cover to cover, but with 3 kids, it might take me a little bit of time, so I glossed through it and found some of the fine points. If you could, though, James, for some people who may not be familiar with your career and all that, just kind of give us a little brief introduction of how you entered into wrestling and how you got involved with World Class, and what time did you actually show up? I believe it was around 85 is when you first came in, but if you could kind of fill in some of our listeners on that, and then we'll discuss more about the book.
Well, I actually got to know a lot of the guys. I was in the music business before I ended in the wrestling business, and I got to know a lot of the boys, and it was kind of a gradual process. I was a fan when I was younger, so I had followed it and knew quite a bit about it, and just through talking to them and getting to know some of the guys, they eventually thought that I might be someone who they could trust to be a part of the business, and I kind of toe in the water for a little bit, and then the next thing I knew, I was busy, and it's kind of history from there. But,
so what year did you in
that was when I first started was around 85, yeah, and then I was still playing music at the time, so it was kind of a back and forth thing for a while, but eventually got to the point that I was just staying busy with it, and it became my main focus.
Okay. Now, not to stray away from the topic here too quick, but I just want to kind of throw something out there. A couple of years ago, had a chance to see Kevin in Las Vegas. He was at the Colossal Air reunion, and you had asked me to pass along a message telling me he said hi and all that, which I gladly did, no problem. He did kind of tell us one little thing, no? Or he told the guy next to me was that you're related to the drummer from ZZ Top.
Yes.
That is correct.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
Okay.
So
I just wanted to kind of clear that up in there because I wasn't sure if he was pulling the rib on the guy or not.
No, we are related. It's kind of one of those, not one of those kitchen cousins, distant cousin things, but yes, we are.
All right. Sounded me, I believe to me, he actually said you were his brother, but.
Well, you got to remember, Michael, in wrestling, everybody is everybody's brother.
That's true, and you were talking to Kevin too, so you don't remember that.
We're talking to Kevin.
Might have been related.
No said, huh?
Okay, back to the book though. One of the things, you came in '85. That was after the death of. Well, that was after David's death.
Yes.
But now, were you were friends with some of the guys before that, correct?
Right.
Is what you were saying.
Yeah.
So at that point,
I was yeah.
At that point in time, the Freebirds and the Von Erichs, that feud was just about ending in '85. David Von Erich's passing was in '84. Kerry had won the title in May of '84, and then lost back to Flair. So when you came in was shortly before they switched it over and it became World Class Wrestling Association. What was it like coming into at just that tail end where a lot of people say that was almost at the end of the world class that everybody knows and loves and was going into the World Class Wrestling Association where a lot of the guys were moving over to with Ken Mantell going over to Wild West Wrestling. What was it like going into the ring and into the organization at that time? Just what was going on?
Well, things were kind of on a down cycle at that point, especially compared to the way it used to be, and it had its moments, but it wasn't quite as exciting as it was during the heyday portion of that run, but it was still interesting, and it got kind of political there for a little while with things, but you get hooked on it, and you just want to try to make it as good as you can, so you hang in there with it.
Now, you got there in '85. How long were you there for?
Oh, I was in and out. Of course, back in those days, a lot of guys were it wasn't like it used to be. So you were working here and you're working there and trying to stay busy. And like I said, I was still playing music, so I was kind of in and out of things at that point in time.
So, '85. So, about what? Then you worked for Global Wrestling Federation shortly after World Class folded, correct?
Well, yeah. Actually, I worked for USWA first, and then I worked for Global after that. And all during that time, Gary Hart ran a promotion in Dallas, also Texas Wrestling Federation. I worked for Gary, and so it was kind of a hodgepodge back in those days. Gary was doing his thing. Tim Brooks had a promotion he was running, and and USWA was coming in, and all of that went down and everything, and then eventually, of course, Global came in, and I get my dates sometimes mixed up, but it was kind of a confusing time back in those days. And it wasn't long. Somewhere in that period of time, I started making my first trip to Japan too. So, it was a busy time, but it was really kind of you try to catch as much work as you could here and there and everywhere.
James, when the USWA took over, when Jerry Jarrett started running the office here, were you one of the guys that would go from here and go up and work the Tennessee circuit as well, in addition to Dallas?
No.
I know some guys would work here and then go up and do the Tennessee circuit.
No, I didn't. I didn't go up there and work in Tennessee at that time. I did the TV here in Dallas for them, and I did that for a period of time. But I was gone a lot. I'd be going to Japan, and I come back, and I did that a few times, and then they eventually brought in Paul Neighbors from Tennessee, and I didn't do TV there for a little while. I just worked for Gary here then, and so it was kind of a. They kind of had their own guys there for a while. But, obviously it didn't last very long.
Right. Now in Japan, I think you mainly, and I might be wrong, please correct me if I am, I believe you worked mainly for the SWS, which was ran by Tenru, correct?
That's correct. I did. Well, that was the first company I worked for, yeah.
And you actually worked the WWF SWS conjunction show. It was the second year that WWF had come to Japan and ran a show with the Japanese promotion. The first time was, I believe, in 1990 when they ran with Baba.
Yeah, they actually were sending guys. When I first went to work for Tenru, they were totally independent, and somewhere during the time they made an agreement with Vince, and they started sending guys over to her then, and for a while there it was a mixed deal. We had some WWF guys and then some independent guys or guys from other parts of the country that didn't work for WWF on the tours, and then eventually they decided they just wanted to be exclusive WWF guys over there with the Japanese crew, and I was still working there with them then too, but they ran every month over there with WWF wrestlers on the tours, just different ones on every tour.
For people who have never, for people who have never worked in Japan or maybe never even seen Japanese wrestling, tell everybody about the dynamic, because it is very different over there. The fans they're very vocal, but it seems like they're very vocal only in certain spots, and there's other spots where they're just completely silent. And I believe that's respect for the people, because in Japan, I've heard over the years that they treat wrestling, it's battle. The wrestlers are warriors, and it's a really big deal in Japan, as it should be everywhere. Tell everybody what the difference is from doing TV here and then going over to Japan.
Well, I'm sure it's different now, but when I first went over there, and for most of the time that I worked in Japan, there was a stark difference in the way the business was treated, not just by the fans, but by the media and everybody over there. It was treated pretty much like just a regular sport, like we treat football or basketball or baseball over here. Covered that way in the media, and even though the fans were, they were very intelligent, very smart people, but they really appreciated what we were doing, and they reacted differently. They weren't, they didn't just scream and yell about everything. They would pop on certain things, but usually it was something that, something really impressive. Somebody escaped a hole, or somebody does something particularly impressive, and they would pop on that. But for the most part, they were pretty quiet. They'd clap a little bit, but I saw a lot of guys go over there and try to do the cheap heat thing. Try to do some stuff to rile them up, and they'd just laugh at them. And then be kind of disconcerting to some of the guys that weren't used to that. But there were some guys, like Bob Orton Jr. and Haku and Barb, and so some of those guys that had spent a lot of time over there, and they understood how to work over there, and it was a big difference. But they really appreciated the technical aspects of the business, and they weren't too high on just because you could make some kind of cute quote or something. It didn't mean anything to them. But if you could really wrestle, then they showed their appreciation just in a different way.
I think.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Michael.
Well, now I've heard over in Japan, the arenas over there are like tens of thousands in the seats in those arenas as compared to what might be considered a sellout over here, which would be like 11 or 12. Is that true with the arena size? And what was it like working for a crowd that big that, for the most part, from what I've seen in Japanese wrestling, is they're very quiet until they see that chain of wrestling moves, and then it's a loud burst of applause. But what was it like to work in front of a crowd that's that big and that quiet as compared to working over here in the States where a crowd is smaller but really loud?
Well, it's a different psychology. For one thing, you have to treat it like a competition. You just like a football player would or a baseball player would. You concentrate on your opponent and you do what you've got to do for that, and at the right time you'll get you get a show of appreciation for doing the right things. But it's a different it is a different feel. I mean your whole especially now it used to not be quite this way because some of the more traditional territory guys they understood the fact that sometimes it's getting the fans to pop isn't really what you're trying to do. You're trying to get them invested in what you're doing in the ring and emotionally invested in it. And that's really what the key to it was over there. And you're not just trying to keep them going full blast for 3 hours. You're trying to make them appreciate what you're doing and do it at the right time. And in that case, you're leading them. And a lot of times nowadays it's the other way around. It's almost like a rock concert or a cheerleading type thing, where the crowd is programmed to pop at the right times and for the right phrases and for the right moves and all that kind of stuff. And over there it was much more like the traditional days here where the wrestlers actually led the crowd, and they dictated where they were going to pop and where they were going to react and how they were going to react. And you just approach it that way. You don't worry about keep them screaming all the time. That's not really, to be honest with you, that's not the point in wrestling anyway. It's kind of gotten that way in the last several years, but to me, a successful wrestling match doesn't have anything to do with how long and how hard they scream. It's whether they really understand and get into what you're doing, and that was the point over there. So you approach it that way, and it's appreciated, and it was great. It's not like you didn't get any response. I mean, when you got a response, it really was meaningful. It wasn't just some kind of hollow, like I said, cheerleading type thing where they're just yelling just to be yelling. Yeah, it was fun working in front of. I think the first crowd I ever worked in front of over there was like 17,000 or 18,000, and I'd worked in a sportatorium where we had 4,000 or 5,000, and that was great and wonderful atmosphere. But it's a different ballgame. Sure was.
Well, over there, and correct me if I'm wrong, James, and this is just what I've been told over the years, the biggest show of the year is the Dome Show, which would be WrestleMania for American fans. And then they do have the smaller arenas. They have Kurikan Hall. They have the Budokan. They do have the smaller places, but the Dome Show is the biggest. So some of the bigger matches, now it's changed over the years, but some of the bigger matches, especially back in the older days, were at the Dome Show. That was the place to have a show. It was like Texas Stadium for here. That was the show, and that's the big baseball stadium, the Tokyo Dome, and they also have Kawasaki Stadium, which I don't know if I think some of the other promotions in Japan, maybe not the All Japans, the New Japans, and the SWS and the NOAH. I think some of the other promotions, the FMWs, and I think the IWA is the King of the Death Match, which we won't get into, but I think they ran, the more the Kawasaki baseball stadiums. But yeah, the Tokyo Dome is it's like Madison Square Garden.
Right. Over here. The Tokyo Dome held about 60,000, I think, if I remember right. And yeah, you'd have some big shows there, and those were always exciting. But attached to the Tokyo Dome was Kurikan Hall, and that's where all of the all the major promotions did their TV there, and you always ran Kurikan Hall. That if you were anybody, you ran Kurikan Hall, and it held. I can't remember now. Probably 2,500, maybe 3,000. I don't know. And it, of course, it was always full, and that was probably the smallest show you would do over there. And that was right in the middle of Tokyo. But it was just kind of a given that that's where you were going to work, and it was, and in all honesty, working at Kurikan Hall was kind of akin to working at the Sportatorium in Dallas. It was kind of one of those legendary places. But sometimes we'd work there, and I got to work at the Sumo Palace, which was really a unique experience, and of course all the in Osaka, and Yokohama and all those nice towns that had the big arenas and stuff, and we enjoyed those.
Also, when the guys, I don't know how it is now with the WWF doing all these, or WWE, doing all the world tours and going into all the countries now. It's more of an normal occurrence now. But back then, the guys would go over in groups. It was kind of like a tour group type thing. They would go over in groups, and from what I've read in books and from what I've heard from talking to people, they were given or they were assigned someone that went out, that took them around and helped like an interpreter or a host. And over there, they were treated with a lot more, like they were bigger stars over there in Japan sometimes than they were over here, because in Japan, they didn't get to see these guys all the time, so it was like more of a respect factor when these guys came over. They were more, I believe the term was gaijin or whatever the term, I believe that's the term.
Gaijin.
Okay, sorry, yeah. I don't speak.
Yeah, that's part of the reason for that is that the Japanese media, at least in those days, I'm not sure. I'm sure that they do it now, but maybe not to the same degree. But when I was over there were like three weekly magazines and then some other monthly publications and that kind of thing that covered wrestling extensively. Now, I mean, not just in Japan, but over here and in Europe. And, there were a lot of times I would go to Japan and, when I get there that first week, the magazine would come out like on a Thursday or Friday or whatever day it came out, and there would be pictures, of myself working in Global or somewhere in the States, and then in the same magazine there would be coverage of that tour that I was on in Japan. So, those guys knew everything you did. If you did something in the United States and of any significance at all, by the time you got over there, they knew who you were. I mean, they even knew who I was. And, I was just a referee. So it was very, very detailed coverage over there, and very extensive, and they would send guys over here to take pictures, and then they had their contacts over here and that kind of thing, and they did feature stories, and it was just it's just amazing the way they treated the business over there. It was a great feeling because you really were treated with a lot of respect because of that, just how they looked at the business and how they looked at the guys that were in it.
All right. Well, James, I happen to be looking on there. It looks like we have a caller on the line. Would you be open to taking a couple questions?
Sure, no problem.
All right, area code 208. Are you on the line?
Yes, this is Brian Westcott.
Hey, Brian, how you doing?
Not too bad. Nice to get to talk to you, James.
Yeah,
heard a lot of great things about you. I read a little bit of an interview that you did with Richard Bergen some years ago. I'm looking forward to getting a copy of your autobiography soon.
Well, thank you. And I have to say this, it's not really so much an autobiography. I'm not. I don't have the ego to think that people want to know that much about me. Although it does, it does have some of my personal experiences as far as starting out and some other things about me just to kind of set the thing up. But the book really is more about. The bulk of the book is more about some of the personalities I've worked with and some of the significant people that in my career, like Gary Hart and Skandar Akbar and Chris Adams and Gino Hernandez and Bruiser Brody, and I can just go on and on and on. Dick Murdoch. But there's stories about those guys from my perspective, and my interaction with them and that kind of thing. But so it's not really a true autobiography. I wouldn't want to bore anybody with that. But it's really it's got a lot of that in it, and it's got quite a few observations about my feelings about certain things about the business. And there's a pretty extensive chapter in there about the refereeing and how I feel about it and what I think it should be and how it should be handled and that sort of thing. So you know, you're not going to get much dirt on me, but you'll get my experiences with a lot of guys that I work with, and you, and a lot of guys that you'll be familiar with.
Oh, cool.
So the dirt on you will come in Volume 2.
Now, Volume 2 is going to be more about my experiences with the different promotions. This one has some world class in it, and it touches on some other things with global and things. But the second book will have more detailed experiences with the promotions and my time in Japan and Germany and Singapore and also the story about the USWA and how that all went down when it ended, and that sort of thing. So I think it's going to be an interesting book too. But this one is more about the personalities.
Oh, cool! Looking forward to it.
Brian, a question for James. Brian's a member of the Cauliflower Alley Club, and he's a research analyst. He's a walking encyclopedia of professional wrestling. Did you have a question for James while you were on the line?
That's what I was going for.
Definitely. If you do have one particular question, what were your thoughts with, well, I know I first heard of you through the Global Wrestling Federation. I noticed when Joe Pedicino and company left, and then basically I found out through Rod Price, when I interviewed him back in October of 1999, he said that Skandor Akbar basically took over the booking, and apparently you got to help out with that. What was that like for you with that transition?
Well, you know, when Global first came in, of course, and in those days I was gone a lot. I would go to Japan and stay for sometimes 6 or 8 weeks. You know, I would go over there and do a tour, and then I would stay between tours and work in the training center. And then when the second tour would come over, I'd do that one, and then I'd come home for a little while, and then I'd go back and do it again. So, there were times when I'd be gone for quite a while. And when Global started up, Act called me, and God bless him, you know, if I owe anything to anybody, I owe it to Act, because, you know, I like I said, I'd be gone so much over there and come back, and I never lost my spot. In fact, if anything, it became enhanced over the years because a lot of it because of him, because he was kind of like a sponsor over here for me. And you know, when it started up, the idea was to bring in a lot of different talent from a lot of different places, which they did. And you know, it was a hodgepodge of wrestlers, and you know, young and old, and some really, really incredible talent, you know, that they had, and you know, and then of course they had some money problems, and Pedicino left, and there was a little period of time when actually USWA came in for just a very short time. Again, world class, you know, tried to restart again with Kevin, but then Gray Pearson bought the Global name, and that's when I started getting a little bit more involved in the booking side in Global. And you know, Ack was kind of running things, but we also brought Eddie Gilbert in, and you know, he was here for a while, and it was you know, the transition was difficult because we didn't have as much money. We had to depend on a lot more of the local and Texas talent and some of the younger guys that were from around, but we still had a lot of good guys. I mean, you know, if you look back on the roster back then, we had some you know, some veterans that still lived in the area that we used, and then we brought in some younger guys like Booker T and Stevie Ray, and we had John Layfield and Bobby Duncombe, and you know, I just go on and on and on. We had a pretty good crew of young guys that ended up doing pretty well in the business. So it was fun to work with them and get to kind of be a part of their learning process. And in some cases, that's what it was like. You know, we had some guys that could guide them, and you know, we did the best we could with what we had. There were some things that went on in Global during that period of time that and I kind of shake my head at, and they were kind of silly, and I wish that it hadn't been done. But if you
the first bungee jumping match
Yeah,
between
well,
Chaz and Stephen Dane. I remember that.
Yeah, I knew somebody would bring that up. And if you notice, I was nowhere near that thing. Ack and I refused to go out in the parking lot. We both stayed in the dressing room, in fact, in the booking room, watching it on a monitor. I didn't have anything to do with it. But those kinds of things were silly, and and of course, I guess the upside to that is that everybody still remembers them, so they must have had some kind of effect. But if you look beyond some of that stuff, there was some good wrestling going on in Global, and you see it now. Yeah, they're replaying all those shows on ESPN too, or ESPN Classic or whatever it is, and there's a lot of good wrestling going on in Global during that time, even around all the silliness. So, I'm really pretty proud of that period of time and what we accomplished considering the circumstances.
It really was a great period of time. I think what attracted me to it was, and just seeing Jim Cornette involved, but seeing Scott Hudson, Craig Johnson, of course, John Horton, and Joe Pedicino, and they were mentioning insider information, past histories of wrestlers. I mean, that had never been done before.
Yeah,
WCW or WWE was doing that. I thought that was incredible.
Yeah, it was kind of went against the grain and the typical wrestling promotion. That one of the rules of the territories usually was you just don't acknowledge anybody else. But Joe had the idea of wanting to create a more open type atmosphere as far as the production, as far as the TV show is concerned. And yeah, he talked about that and talked about what happened in WWF at the time and WCW at the time and that kind of thing. And I thought it was kind of refreshing that happened. It's not like everybody had their head in the sand. A lot of the old timers, kayfabe and all that kind of thing, they thought that I guess the perception was that fans weren't smart, but they've been smart forever. It's just a matter of how open you are about things, and we didn't have the internet and all those things back in those days, but they had what we call the dirt sheets and the fans themselves, even the ones that didn't read those things and didn't keep up with it that way, they weren't they knew what was going on. They just didn't care. They wanted us to entertain them and get them emotionally involved in what we were doing, and that's what we strove to do, and I don't think that there really was that much difference in the fans then and the fans now, other than there's just a lot more open and a lot more blazing about what goes on.
Which has also explained, I think about 1987 when the Wrestling Fans International Association, when that became defunct, that was when Cauliflower Alley Club started inviting the fans to the reunions. Mm-hmm. Now, like I say, when I first went, it felt like a kid in a candy store because I wanted so much to respect the people in the kayfabe era, and just realizing kayfabe is dead, and now I'm a full-blown participant in this thing. I'm getting to know these people as human beings.
The first Cauliflower Alley I went to was in New Jersey, and
that one.
Yeah, I was in kind of shock because I was, I went there and I didn't expect anybody to know who I was, but there were so many fans there that just knew everything, and I was like, wow. It was a shock to me for a while, and then I realized that get your head out of the sand, that Cauliflower Alley really did kind of bring a lot of fans into the mix.
Well, Michael, did you have another question for James? I know you had a few questions you wanted to line up.
I did have a couple more questions. We're talking about Global, and unfortunately, yes, we all do remember the bungee jumping match with who was that again, Brian?
Stephen Dane and Stephen Dane.
Yeah,
it was James Beard, Dusty Wolf. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
I actually covered that very thing. Honestly, I do. I covered this thing in the next book. There's a story about that, and even though I'm pleading totally innocent to the whole thing. Ack and I warned them. We knew when they came up with that idea. We said, first of all, it's a dumb idea, but second of all, there's no way this is going to happen without some kind of technical problems. Well, right off the bat, the camera up and the platform went out. So we were back in the back watching all this, and we were just kind of shaking our heads, going, "Oh, yeah, well, we told them." But yeah. I mean, but here you are talking about it. How many years later? So
it obviously did something.
It must be something. It's kind of like that pay-per-view we did, the Bodyguards and Bandits thing. It was horrible.
Oh yeah, CWA.
But people still talk about it. And so I guess that's if that's the point, then it was successful.
I really enjoyed the CWA. Right. It would come on. They had a local spot here on Channel 27 or Channel 39, and it came on, I think, in 95 or 96. And I really enjoyed it because it really, it wasn't as hot as the previous eras. I remember one night, it was Dole King and I think Angel of Death were on the play-by-play. And I was in my teens. And I remember one night they came on and they announced Terry Gordy versus One Man Gang in the main event on television tonight. Mm-hmm. And I got so excited. That was a big deal to me. And of course,
kind of hard to get better than that, isn't it?
Huh?
Kind of hard to get any better than that.
Yeah, and of course it wasn't as good as it was maybe, 10 or 15 years before, but it was still Terry Gordy and the One Man Gang in the Dallas Sportatorium.
Right.
How cool is, and that's 1996. And I remember John Layfield was about to come in. He was working WWF, and I was a big fan of him when he came in WWF because it reminded me of Stan Hansen. And he was going to come in and work Rob Price in 1997, and he lost television or something happened, and I was so mad because I wanted to see Rob Price and Bradshaw. Oh, I was so mad.
Well, I trust me, I've seen them both at their best. And, they actually wrestled each other several times in Global, but that was back when Gray had it, when John first came in.
That's the cool thing about today is now fans are experiencing that either for the first time or they're re-experiencing it thanks to ESPN. And I think it's so cool that people are getting to see, that. There were some dumb ideas, but I remember watching just a few months ago, I watched Stevie Ray and Booker T wrestle Dwayne and Scott, the Kongs. Yeah. And they went 25 minutes, and they tore the house down. And AJ ran in, and he's still running in down here, folks, doing the big booyah. But it was such good wrestling. It really was. And I love the Kongs. I go way back with them like James does. Man, to see those guys bumping around like those guys, and then you go back and you watch them on WCW, and man, you're just like, I think WCW missed the ball on us on the Kongs. I really do. I think those guys with Vader, with Harley, could have been one of the baddest stables of all time.
There's no question about that. They were very, very much misused there, and those two guys, they were two of my favorite guys anyway. Inside or out of the ring didn't matter, but you got two guys that weigh 400 pounds apiece that can move like they can move, and they really understood how to work. You don't see that very often, and we had them here, and they were a couple of our main guys, and that's the kind of talent we had around here. Really, we had a lot of guys like.
Right. It's amazing to watch that stuff again, and some of it was really good, and a lot of people cut their teeth down here. That's what I always, so many people cut their teeth down here. That's why this territory is still a big deal to me, and that's why it should go down. Jim Ross did an interview with IHWE a few months ago, and he said no state has contributed more to this business than the state of Texas. And Dallas-Fort Worth contributed so much. We could have a show for 2-3 hours and talk about all the people that came through here. Undertaker, Austin, Booker T, Bradshaw. Doug and Eddie Gilbert came through here. Of course, Eddie was already established, but I mean, we could go on and on and on with the people that have either come through the Dallas-Fort Worth area on their way to bigger success or that cut their teeth here. And I mean, James, you got to work with, I believe you got to work with Taker before he, and Austin and Booker T.
Yeah.
I mean, looking back, and Mick Foley. I mean, looking back, was there a moment where you looked at one of those guys and just thought, this guy's going to, I mean, probably not.
Actually, there were some of those guys that I had no doubt that they were going to be successful. I mean, Steve Austin was, from the minute I met him until I helped him when he and Matt Bourne got in the car to go to WCW when he first started. When he left Dallas and went up there, Rod Price and I pushed that car off so they could go. He didn't even have a battery that would crank the car. And, I knew Steve well. He spent a lot of time around my house. I worked out with him. I trained with him. And, of course, I worked in the ring with him a lot of times on TV and in house shows and things. But there was no doubt in my mind that Steve was going to be a star. I mean, he just had that kind of drive and that kind of dedication. And the same thing with John Layfield. I saw the same thing in him, because they were so dedicated to being that, Mark Calloway was here. He wasn't here a long time, but you could tell he had the talent to do something. And had the kind of mindset, and Booker T. We had no doubt about Booker T. whatsoever. And I can name a bunch of them like that, that came through.
Now, speaking of John Layfield, there's a quote on the back cover of your book where he actually said that one of the reasons why he became the longest-running WWE champion on SmackDown was James Beard.
There's a whole chapter in there about John, and John actually did the foreword to the book. He and I have been friends ever since the day I met him. And the story is in the book, and it talks about how he first came to the Sportatorium and what kind of it was just a fluke thing. I mean, he showed up out of the clear blue on a day that we needed somebody, and we just stuck him in a main event match and with a loose end on it, where I had the option of either cutting it short or letting it go, and I let it go. It was a real quick decision on my part that I knew the guy had something, and from that moment on, he and I spent a lot of time together. I worked out with him a lot. He had been trained by Brad Rangans, and when he came down here, because he had that Brad was an excellent trainer, and he had all the basics down. But I spent a lot of time in the ring with him, polishing him off and trying new things, and it was a fun thing seeing him develop. And we became not just workmates, but we became very close friends, and that carries on to the day. I still, I don't get to see him much, but we stay in touch.
For people who don't know who Brad Rankins is, for people who don't know who that is, he has trained some of the greatest wrestlers of all time. If you want to know one of his products that's currently on TV right now, Brad had a hand in Brock Lesnar's training. So, I mean, just there, that pretty much says it all right there. I mean, Brad, if you want to go back and see the Iron Sheik's WWE Hall of Fame induction that he pretty much tried to hijack the show, all he does is talk about Brad Rankins. So Brad Rankins is one of the greatest trainers of all time. So for John to have that training initially and then to come down here and get to work with James, get to work with Akbar and all the people who were in the Sportatorium at the time, it's no wonder. I mean, I told James the story the other day. I was a big Bradshaw fan. As soon as he came into WWF, I was like, oh, this guy's got something. And when the night he won the title, we were at a theater watching it. Mostly Latino was in the theater. We stood up, started applauding when Eddie lost and JBL won. And I thought we were going to get assaulted like no tomorrow. But it was a big deal. And, just this past Sunday, John's music hits, and he goes into the ring just to get thrown out. One of the biggest pops of the night because people respect what John contributed.
He was actually in the same training class with Sean Waltman when Brad was training both of them. And,
oh wow!
Yeah, so they had a pretty. I'm sure they had a lot of good workouts up there. but yeah, John, I actually went to when John was in Germany, and I went over there for a while, and when I got back, I went to New York and went to the offices up there and took John's material, his pictures and his information and things, and talked to them about him and trying to get them to bring him in. Of course, they were aware of him, but they had as of yet contacted him. So after I talked to them and kind of gave them what I thought, it wasn't very long until they contacted him and he was under contract. And of course, the rest is history. He stayed that way until today. He's still working with them. And just to catch you up on, he stays in Bermuda most of the time. That's where he's got a home in New York, and he still has a home here in Texas. But he's over in Bermuda a lot, works with a lot of young kids over there, does a lot of good charity work, and he's doing a lot of good things.
You brought up Sean Waltman. One of the greatest series of all time came out of Dallas, came out of Global. Sean Waltman and Jerry Lynn. Those matches set a trend that I believe started the cruiserweight, hysteria. They were doing it years before WCW. Tell us about, seeing what those guys were doing.
Oh, it was great. Jerry and Sean were doing things. What they did was they took a little bit of lucha, a little bit of Japanese style, and mixed that with the traditional wrestling, and created something that was just that hadn't been done before, really, on a consistent basis. I mean, there'd always been guys who did some high flying stuff and all that kind of stuff, but nobody put it together the way they did, and nobody did it the way they did, and still maintained a psychological level that they kept it at, because their work was, their work was absolutely incredible. I mean, when you got through with that match, you understood everything that happened. It wasn't like they went in and did just a bunch of spots. They told story, and they put it all together and did things that nobody was doing at the time. And you're right, they really were the precursor to the what the cruiserweights ended up doing a few years later. And being in the middle of that, man, it was exciting and a lot of fun. I enjoyed working with both of those guys a lot. And and we had Chaz was here at the time, and he was a cruiserweight. Of course, you wouldn't know it by looking at him now, but he was doing a lot of that stuff too, or learning a lot of that stuff, and he had some good matches with Sean also. So we had some pretty exciting stuff going on here, especially with those guys.
All right, James. Anyways, for anybody out there who's listening right now, who's going to be listening to the archives, who's listening to the show live, or going to be downloading this in their archives, how can they order the book? Because I've read some of it. The stories in there are great. I'm sure David agrees with me. We'd love to have you back on as a guest, a few weeks later on down the road, talk more about the book, talk about what's coming up in Volume 2. But how can they go out and get the book right now?
Okay, go to www.jamesbeardbook.com, and that'll take you to the site, actually to Mark James's site, and it gives you all the information you need about ordering the book. Of course, it's on Amazon. It's also on Kindle, and from what Mark has been telling me, it's up there in one of the bestseller lists, so it's doing pretty well right now, and I'm pretty proud of it. I think it turned out well, and so far the reaction we're getting from people seem to be positive, and like I said, it's not really about me. It's about my experiences with other people, and some other little tidbits here and there. There is a couple of things about myself, obviously, because that's what it is. But it's really the idea was to give a view of the business and of these guys from a different perspective, and somebody who's not really a superstar or somebody trying to make a name for himself. It was just I had a unique vantage point, I guess, in the business because of the position I was in and the duties I had and the chance I had to travel with so many different guys and spend so much time around them. So, it's really kind of a different view of the business, and I hope hope people will give it a chance and enjoy it when they read it.
All right. Well, I'm sure David will when he gets a chance to, and I'm going to pass it over to David. Sounds like he's ready to jump on here, and we're going to, thank you for coming on the show tonight, and I'll let David finish us off.
Well, thanks, guys.
Yeah, we want to thank James for coming on. James is going to be kind of a recurring guest. He's going to be coming on here every few weeks. Of course, he's working very closely with IHWE on the Texas Wrestling Hall of Fame and our live events. He's also going to be participating in our guest booker series, which will be really cool. But James still travels down here in Texas, so if you're down here in Texas and you have an opportunity to see James or meet James is going to be going around doing more appearances and stuff. He's a very helpful guy down here, and we're very lucky to have him. We're very lucky he's back involved. So many different people and so many different promotions are really, really getting some great education from James. So from all of us here in Texas, James, I want to thank you, and I can't wait to have you back on. And I hope the book does just beyond the Call of Duty. I hope it does just great and beyond.
Thank you, David. I appreciate it, and anytime, and I'll be in touch.
All right, James. Thank you so much, James Beard. Everybody, good night, James.
Good night.
All right, that was James Beard, Texas Wrestling Hall of Famer. Folks, we spent an hour with James, and we haven't even begun to cut the surface on what this guy knows. He has got a knowledge that is second to none. Even Dave Meltzer has said James Beard is one of the smartest people in the wrestling business. So JamesBeardBook.com. If you want to go to Amazon, type in James Beard Wrestling. You'll find his book there. Kindle, you can ebook it and you can read it on any number of different devices. What a cool interview, and like I said, we want to thank Brian Westcott for calling in. We're sorry if we didn't get to all your questions, Brian. Doing live radio. Some things get in, some things don't. We apologize. And James is going to be coming back on here for guest booker. I do want to say this coming Sunday, Super Bowl Sunday, we will be presenting a very special edition of IHWE Radio. It will be the inception, the debut of our guest booker series, and we're going to have 2014 IHWE Hall of Famer Dusty Wolf, who also is an author of a wrestling book, and who wrestled over the years on television as Dale Wolf. He will be on here, and we're going to be rebooking the NWA Mid-South storyline. When Jim Crockett Promotions purchased Bill Watts' Universal Wrestling Federation, or Mid-South Wrestling, there was supposed to be, everybody thought this would be this huge angle that would lead to pay-per-view buy rates. And for whatever reason, it didn't happen. Much like when WWF purchased WCW. We're going to reevaluate that, and Dusty has booked for several different promotions over the years. Dusty's going to give his insight on what he would have done, and we're just going to have some fun with it. And we'll be doing one of these every so often with different people. I'm really excited about it. That'll be Super Bowl Sunday. I believe it starts at 2 o'clock Central Standard Time. It'll be over with plenty of time for you to see the game. So check us out. And we got 10 minutes left, Michael. Is there anything you want to chat about? Justin Bieber's on my TV in a gel outfit. Wow, okay.
Say that again?
He looks like Nails, but younger.
Okay. But speaking of the Super Bowl, just out of curiosity, David, I'm sure, living in Texas, I'm pretty sure everybody in Texas has to be a football fan. I think it's actually like a law. You have to, if you live in Texas, you have to be a football fan. Is that how it works?
I'm not, so if that's the case, I need to move. I'm not a big sports fan. I'm into wrestling, I'm into boxing, I'm into MMA. Wow. I'm not a sports fan.
Well, I was going to ask you who you thought was going to win this week's Super Bowl, but obviously...
I'll go with Seattle because that's the only team I know who's in it. I'll watch the game, but I don't even know who's in it. So
not
yep.
Seattle.
Hashtag lame. Hashtag uber lame. Sorry, folks. Just not a big sports fan. So.
I'm sorry, folks. I'm going to find a better co-host. We're going to talk more. Throwing a little football in here. Living in Texas. He doesn't watch football. Oh, my God. Come on. Friday Night Lights. We all know Texas football, high school. Come on. It's a great sport. Anyways, you're talking to guest bookers.
I went to a few high school football games when I was in high school. I went. I just never participated. So.
You were watching the cheerleaders, right? You were watching the cheerleaders.
Oh, sure. Sure.
Of
I
course.
was also beginning a dynasty down here with IHWE in a backyard, so that's what I was doing in my high school years.
Now, that's one thing I want to talk about on a future show. We need to have you as a guest, not the co-host, but be the guest. We'll call Brian and we'll have him co-host with me that night. I want to hear more about the IHWE story. You started off as a 16-year-old kid. You had the chance to become a promoter. You promoted IHWE. You've obviously got a great story because, as you said just a couple days ago, you got a publishing company that wants to do a book deal with you. I want you to be a guest on one of these days. Let's get you on. Not as a co-host, let's get you on as a guest. Let's tell the IHWE
I appreciate it. Yeah, I was astounded when I talked about a guy by the name of Ken Dunn, and he runs a national publishing and marketing company. And I told him my story, and he was astounded. And he said he wanted it, and we're working out the deal right now. Like James said, an autobiography is kind of putting it. It's not going to be that because, like James, James has a better story than I do. But I told the publishing company, I'm not that big of an egomaniac to think that my story applies to all the demographics. It'll mostly be about my years in wrestling, but it'll also be about my childhood, my teenage years, because that kind of was the catalyst to everything, and where I'm at right now because I have a wonderful family, and I want to tell my story, and apparently they want to publish it, so I'm extremely excited about it.
Well, I know I'm interested in reading about it, but I think some of the fans out there will be also interested. Another thing, along with Guest Booker series that you were discussing, I'm currently working on it right now. I'm hoping in the next month or two, we're going to have a special episode on the history of the Portland wrestling territory, the Don Owens territory, guys where Roddy Piper, Buddy Rose, Ed Wiskowski, who people from watching AWA remember as Colonel De Beers, they went through that Portland territory. And like Texas, you work Texas, a lot of them work Portland. That was another territory that you went through. I'm working on booking some guests right now that know a lot about the Portland wrestling history. I think that's going to be a big show. We're going to have more details on that as that picks up. And also, I'm going to do a little cheap plug this afternoon. I had a chance to do an interview with Wrestling Memories. It's going to air this Saturday at, I believe it's 9 a.m. Central Standard Time. It's on Pioneer 90.1, or you can listen to it on radionorthland.org, or you can use the TuneInRadio.com or the TuneIn Radio app. Listen to it on your smartphone, your tablet, your computer, wherever you may be. Just type in Pioneer 90.1. The show will come up, like I said, 9 a.m. Central Standard Time. We talk about Encyclopedia WCCW. We talk about the IHWE radio show. I gave us a cheap plug. That's always a good thing. And we talk about world-class, wrestling in general. I got a chance to talk with George Shire, who is another historian of the sport and all that. Somebody I would love to have on as a guest. And, there's some good things going on. The show is building up. We got a lot of positive feedback last week about last week's show. A lot of positive, fans like that one. I have now set up the email address, ihweradio@gmail.com. If anyone out there listening to either live or on the archives has a question for one of our guests, as I said, we've got Bruce Hart, Bill Anderson, Rob Schemberger, Kevin Von Erich, Jameson from WWF is going to be on, I believe, the first week of March, correct?
Yes. Jameson Winter, who was a character during the late 80s, early 90s. If you watch the Bobby Heenan show that aired in 1989 after Primetime Wrestling, he was the guy that Bobby Heenan used to pick on every week. He's going to be a great guest. I can't wait.
He'll be a guest on that show. If you have a question for any of these guests and you just don't have that chance to call in, if you have a question for any of these guests, send it to ihweradio@gmail.com. Either myself or David will read the question. We'll ask it on the air. You can download the archive later, listen to your question, hear the answer. We want to make this show more interactive. We want the fans to be able to call in, to ask questions. Just like Brian called in tonight and talked to James, we want you to call in. I'm sure on the 19th we're going to have a lot of callers. I know a few that are going to call in that want to talk to Kevin Von Erich, so I'm kind of excited about that as well.
Last week, IHWE on social media, we had 10,000 interactions in a 24-hour period. So we are astounded. Another thing, James Beard talked about Gary Hart's promotion running in Dallas. We actually have a full episode of Gary Hart's Texas Wrestling Show on the IHWE YouTube. If you type in IHWE 2009, which is the year that the YouTube page was started, and you go through our videos, you'll see Gary Hart's Texas, I believe it's Texas Championship Wrestling. It's a 2-part series, and I believe the first match has Matt Bourne, Steve Austin, and Iceman King Parsons, and Rob Price in a tag team match. That was the very first match of that show. Bill Mercer's the host. Terry Gordy wrestles the Dragon Master, and it's a really good show. So we actually have it. It's a 2-part video on YouTube, and you can watch an edition of Gary Hart's Texas Championship Wrestling, which is what James alluded to earlier. So there's a piece of history right there.
I'm going to have to check that out. Now that's IHWE 2009 on YouTube, correct?
Correct. Also on that page, you're a big WCCW fanatic. The night that Bill Mercer, Mark Lawrence, and General Skandar Akbar came to IHWE, that moment is in its entirety on YouTube, on our page. I sent the picture that I had with Bill Mercer, Skandar Akbar, and Mark Lawrence to Kevin Von Erich on Twitter, and Kevin really enjoyed that picture. That's one of the things we're going to talk about. Folks, this show is growing. We have some big guests. Next week we have Bruce Hart from the Hart family, the original Calgary Stampede Wrestling. We've got Kevin Von Erich. We've got Rob Schamberger. We've got Jamison Winter. And every day, me and Michael working on more guests. We got Ron Hutchinson lined up. We got the people, so many, Bill Anderson. We've got so many people coming on. It's hard to keep track of, but just listen to us live or download the archive. And like I said, I'm still working on getting this out more different outlets so people can listen to it on a number of different devices. So I'll get my sheet plugged in, and then I'll let you close, Michael. IHWE, Facebook.com /IHWE IHWE Pro Wrestling on Facebook, IHWE Wrestling on Twitter, Instagram, IHWE, YouTube.com /IHWE 2009. I'm on Twitter at HXC Fuller, and I will have more news as it develops on this book. Take it away, Michael.
All right, you can always find me on Facebook at encyclopedia.facebook.com /Encyclopedia World Class. I'm on Twitter at EncycloWCCW. I'm not on Instagram. I'm not cool enough for that yet, I don't think. Actually, I don't even know how that works. But you can also hear me. You can also hear me here every Wednesday night, 8 p.m. Central Standard Time, as the host of IHWE Radio. Definitely something I'm enjoying. I'm looking forward to next week's show. And also, one guest we forgot to mention, next month we have gorgeous Gary Young is going to be on the show. Another one of the favorites. I enjoyed watching his work back in the days of the World Class. Should be a great interview. And according to a lovely voice that just played in my ear, we've only got about less than a minute to close this show. So thank you, everyone, for tuning in, and we'll see you next week.